Deep in the heart of the Bavarian countryside in Germany, there once stood a lonely farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. The year was 1922. The world was changing, but for the Gruber family, life on this secluded farm was defined by isolation and silence. The family consisted of Andreas Gruber, his wife Casilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her two children, Casilia and Josef. Also living with them was their new maid, Maria, who had arrived at the farm just hours before the darkness descended. To the outside world, the Grubers were seen as cold and unfriendly, keeping to themselves behind the thick walls of their remote home. But days before the tragedy, Andreas Gruber began to experience things that defied explanation, things that suggested they were not alone. It started with a newspaper. Andreas found a strange edition on the farm that he had never purchased, an edition from a city far away. Then came the footprints. After a heavy snowfall, Andreas discovered a trail of tracks leading from the edge of the woods directly to the farm. He followed the footprints with his eyes, expecting to see where the stranger had left, but the tracks only led toward the house. They never led away. Andreas searched the barn, the stables, and the surrounding fields, but he found no one. Yet the feeling of being watched never left him. In the quiet of the night, the family began to hear heavy footsteps echoing from the attic, directly above their bedrooms. Andreas investigated the attic multiple times, armed with a lantern and a tool. But every time he reached the top, the space was empty. The previous maid had quit months earlier, claiming the farm was haunted. She insisted she heard voices and felt a presence in the shadows. On the night of March 31st, 1822, the silence of Hinterkaifeck was broken by a horror that would remain unsolved for over a century. One by one, 4 members of the family were lured into the barn. The darkness masked the predator waiting within the straw. It is believed that Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia were killed with a pickaxe, a heavy tool used for farming. The killer then entered the house to find the youngest child, Josef, sleeping in his carriage, and the maid, Maria, in her room. None survived. But the most terrifying part of the Hinterkaifeck mystery was not the deaths themselves. It was what happened after. For several days after the murders, the farm appeared normal to the neighbors. Smoke continued to rise from the chimney. Neighbors saw the cattle being fed. They saw the lights moving through the windows at night. Someone was living in the house with the bodies. The killer had not fled. For nearly 4 days, a stranger cooked meals in the kitchen, slept in the beds, and tended to the farm animals. The bodies lay cold in the barn and the house while the murderer made himself at home, surrounded by the silence of his victims. It wasn't until April 4th, when the townspeople noticed the young Casilia had missed school and the family hadn't been to church, that a search party was formed. When the neighbors entered the barn, they found a sight that would haunt their dreams. The 4 victims were stacked on top of each other, covered with hay and an old door. The investigation began immediately, but the police were met with a crime scene that raised more questions than answers. The motive was a mystery. Money was left in the house in plain sight. This was not a robbery. It was something far more personal and dark. The precision of the wounds suggested a killer who was calm, strong, and intimately familiar with the layout of the farm. The police interviewed over 100 suspects. They looked at former lovers, jealous neighbors, and even wandering vagrants. One theory focused on Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a local man who had a complicated and troubled relationship with Victoria. Schlittenbauer was part of the original search party. His behavior at the scene was noted as suspicious. He moved the bodies before the police arrived. He claimed he was looking for survivors, but others thought he was disturbing the evidence to hide his own tracks. Despite intense questioning, there was never enough evidence to charge him. The case grew colder with every passing winter. The footprints in the snow haunted the investigators. If the killer came from the woods and stayed in the attic, how long had he been watching them? Imagine the terror of the Gruber family, eating their dinner while a killer sat inches above them, listening to their every word through the floorboards. The idea of August's secret tenants is what makes Hinterkaifeck one of the most disturbing cold cases in history. Some believed the killer was Victoria's husband, Karl Gabriel, who was reported to have died in World War I. Rumors circulated that he hadn't died at all, but had returned from the war to find his family life changed, leading him to a vengeful rage. Fellow soldiers claimed they saw him die, but his body was never recovered, leaving the door open for a ghostly return. As the years turned into decades, the farmstead of Hinterkaifeck was eventually demolished. The family wanted the memory erased, but even with the buildings gone, the ground seemed to hold the echoes of that terrible week in 1922. In 2007, modern police academy students in Germany used advanced forensic technology to re-examine the century-old evidence. They used modern profiling techniques and analyzed the original witness statements with the help of computer modeling. They reached a conclusion and identified a prime suspect, but they chose not to release the name out of respect for living descendants. The mystery remains officially unsolved, a dark stain on the history of the Bavarian woods. The Hinterkaifeck murders represent our primal fear of the intruder, the stranger who enters our safe space and waits in the dark. It reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous place to be is in your own home, far from the reach of help. The silence of the farm was not a sign of peace, but a mask for a predator who took his time. Every detail of the case, from the newspaper to the locked doors, points to a mind that was calculated and patient. Why did the killer stay? Why feed the cattle? Perhaps he found a strange comfort in the life he had stolen, or perhaps he was waiting for something else, a secret that died with the Grubers. The pickaxe used in the murders was found a year later, hidden in the floorboards of the attic. It sat there, covered in dust, a silent witness to the screams that no neighbor heard. The skull of the victims were sent to Munich for examination, but they were lost during the chaos of World War II. Without the physical evidence, modern science is limited in what it can discover. Hinterkaifeck has become a staple of true crime lore, inspiring books, films, and endless debates online. People still visit the site where the farm once stood, looking for answers in the rustling leaves of the nearby forest. Was it a crime of passion, or the act of a wandering psychopath who chose a house at random? The tracks in the snow that led only one way remain the most chilling image of the entire narrative. It suggests that once the shadow enters your life, it may never intend to leave. The Grubers lived their final days in a state of growing dread, knowing something was wrong but unable to stop it. We can only hope that the end was swift, though the forensic evidence suggests otherwise for the young Cecilia. The mystery of Hinterkaifeck is a puzzle with missing pieces, a story where the hero never arrives. It challenges our understanding of justice and the limits of human investigation. As we look back at the grainy black and white photos of the crime scene, the distance of time doesn't make it any less terrifying. The unknown archive is filled with stories of disappearances and strange signals, but this is a story of a presence that watched, waited, and acted with absolute brutality. The Bavarian farm is gone, replaced by fields and trees, but the name Hinterkaifeck still carries a weight of horror. It serves as a grim reminder to check the attic and watch the snow for footprints that don't belong. Who was the man who ate the Grubers' bread while they lay in the barn? Where did he go when he finally decided to leave the farm behind? The woods of Bavaria are vast, and they are very good at keeping secrets. Until a confession is found, or a miracle of science occurs, the killer of Hinterkaifeck remains a ghost that walked through the snow and into the history books of the macabre. The shadow in the attic continues to haunt the imagination of all who hear this tale. Thank you for joining us in the unknown archive. Keep your doors locked and never ignore the sounds from above.